Hello, my name is Doug Quinn and I'm the Principal Moderator for 9DR01, Component 1 Devising, A-Level Drama and Theatre, Pearson Edexcel. This presentation will go through the updated guidance that has been approved by Ofqual and has been recorded on the 14th of September 2020. The aim and the objective of this presentation is to confirm the changes and updates to centres and to remind them of any changes to the specification for the 2021 examination series. This video presentation will also address common issues and frequently asked questions that have been raised by various teachers and centres through different social media platforms and through Paul Webster and his team, including drama assessment. The first thing to say to teachers and to centres that are starting their devised work, 9DR01, is don't panic. The changes that we're going to go through on this presentation are minimal. Most centres will be able to continue to work in the way that they always have. And if you are a centre that is able to complete the devising component as normal, please do. The changes that I'm about to outline are designed to support centres who cannot complete the demands of the specification as normal. Remember, drama teachers and students of drama are resilient, creative individuals. We will cope. The changes that you're about to see are for the summer 2021 assessment only. The first change I'd like to draw your attention to is that performers now have the option to perform a monologue or a duologue in Component 1 to support those centres who cannot work in a group. If you are able to work in a group, you should continue to work as normal. But if you're in a centre where you only have one or two candidates, there is the option now to present either a monologue or a duologue as the performance format for Component 1, 9DR01. The new timings are outlined on this slide. So the monologue is a 1 minute and 30 second minimum regulatory time requirement and a maximum of 3 minutes. A duologue would be 3 minutes minimum, 6 minutes maximum. The group timings are as before, a performance group consisting of 3 to 4 performers. We recommend that the minimum time is 15 minutes and the maximum performance time is 20 minutes. You will note, however, that the new regulatory minimum time for 2021 is 3 minutes. For groups that are working with 5 or 6 performers, the recommended minimum time is 20 minutes, that's as it is now, and as it was before, 30 minutes for a maximum performance time, but again, the regulatory minimum time is 3 minutes. So, if you decide that you've got 1 or 2 candidates who would like to work with a monologue, this is some of the changes that will help support that performance format. You'll notice in red I've put monologue performers will not be required to work collaboratively. And therefore there are a couple of things, a couple of phrases and wordings in the specification and in the assessment criteria that we can just go through now. AO4, for example, analysing and evaluating their own work, on pages 25 to 26 of issue 4 of the specification, there are references to collaboration with other theatre makers. This should be ignored for monologue performances. For AO2, within the mark scheme group performance, the use of characterization and communication to realize artistic intentions, pages 29 to 30. Teachers should simply ignore the reference to other performers when you're looking at monologue work. In reference to communication with audience/other performers, teachers that are working with one or two candidates who are delivering a monologue should focus on the audience part of the criteria. There is also reference, AO2, to contribution to the performance as a whole and realization of the group's artistic intentions. If teachers are assessing monologue work, they should focus on the solo contribution and ignore the word group. And if they are working and marking work that is presented by students who are working as a duologue, then this can be considered as a group. So the second change to the current delivery of Component 1, 9DR01, is with regard to design candidates. What's new? The design requirements for this component will be suspended this year, and instead the designers will work according to the Component 2 design requirements outlined on page 40 of issue 4 specification. Basically, what we've decided is that you will be able to mark the work of your design candidates using the assessment criteria that already exists on page 40 of the specification, but that is for component 2. The reason we've done that is that you can, of course, opt to design for monologues and dual logs in component 2, and rather than completely reinvent a whole new grid for assessment, it makes just as much sense to use this grid for component 2 for your students in component 1 who are designing for a monologue or a dual log. This will help support those designers who have worked with a monologue or dual log performance. We consider this to be a clear and straightforward change to manage rather than adjust the component 1 requirements. And then in red at the bottom, I have put, remember, there is no requirement for final performances to be done with fully realized design, set, lighting, costumes, revolve, confetti cannon, the full works, if the performance students are not working with designers. This may well be the year to really follow the mantra, less is more. Looking at this next slide, this goes into a little bit more detail of what we would be expecting to see from design candidates. We would expect to see some form of realization of the design. This may be in the form of a recorded or written presentation explaining the intended design and what has been realized. There may be additional visual evidence such as photographs and graphics. And one of the things that I will be saying to moderators at standardization is that if there is additional evidence supplied by design candidates, we would look at that in good faith. We would look at that as a way of the candidate trying to provide as much evidence as possible to their design journey and to the outcomes they have explored for their performance design realization. So, just to clarify, the design candidate may have a portfolio of 3,000 words, and they may decide that to show us some additional work in their design, they could submit a recording, or there may be extra photographs. What we don't want to see are huge appendices of lots of extra work or 3,000 more words in the word count. If there's a presentation that would support that portfolio, that would be great. Equally, you may have students who are able to complete their design and realize their design as normal. If they can't complete their design as normal, here are some suggestions from us as a senior team to what design candidates might do. For a makeup designer, we would expect to see how their makeup design has been applied to themselves or another person. If not during live performance, they would need to submit photographic or visual recorded evidence showing the makeup on the person. For a lighting designer, we would expect to see either the lighting implemented during the performance or a visual recording of the cue-to-cue lighting states. Similarly, for a sound designer, we would expect to see and hear the sound implemented during the performance or a cue-to-cue operation. Candidates working with design with sound may decide to submit a soundscape or soundtrack on DVD or USB, which outlines the recordings they've used in the production work. For a set designer, we would expect to see that the set is built within the center and evidence of the staging sent to the moderator. That says examiner on here. It should say moderator because, of course, it's the teacher examiner. Photographs or recordings sent to the moderator. If not during the live performance, we would expect to see an indication of performers' entrances and exits, as well as the intended positions of the performers during the performance. For costume designers, we would expect to see the design of the costume realized. If not during the live performance, the costumes could be displayed on another person and evidenced through photographs or visual recordings. It's probably worth just reminding you that on page 40, there is the minimum support documentation required. That would still need to come along to your moderator should this work be called for by the exam board. The next slide is just a helpful, how can designers design safely? So if you have design candidates, it might be worth going through this with them, just reminding them of some of the policies and procedures that you probably have in school already. These are some suggestions for sound and lighting designers, set designers, costume designers, and good practice in keeping ourselves safe and healthy in school. The third change is with regard to the portfolio. Students who have not been able to complete their devised work as normal are supported through subtle changes to the 6 statements. Those subtle changes are really to do with intended final outcomes in place of actual final outcomes. So if for any reason, let's say for an example, your students have completed 99% of their work, they're in their final rehearsals, and then for some reason, somebody was ill at school, or the school went into lockdown, or schools were closed for a couple of weeks, and you weren't able to finish, the portfolio could, of course, talk about final intended outcomes in place of actually the actual outcomes when you did it on the day of the performance. That was slightly clunky the way I said that, so I'm just going to say that again. The 6 statements remain central to the portfolio. Students have to make sure that they've addressed the 6 statements in their portfolio, but if they weren't able to complete their devising process for whatever reason, they would be able to talk about intended final outcomes in place of actual final outcomes. Please note that word limits and time limits should be adhered to as normal. Look at the wording on page 9 of the specification. It is strongly advised that the upper word time limits are adhered to by students to enable them to satisfy the requirement to produce a concise and coherently structured portfolio. So we're not expecting any massive extra long word limit or time limit portfolios. So here are the 6 statements, and you'll see in yellow that some very minor subtle adjustments have been made. So if I take question statement 2, for example, connect your research material to key stages in the development process and to the performance outcomes / intended performance outcomes. Same with question 3. And question 6 has just been changed very slightly. Evaluate the creative choices you made and whether or not they were successful in rehearsal, performance, or intended performance. So it's just allowing students that maybe ran into some difficulty completing the component 1, the opportunity to still fulfill the demands of the portfolio. Question 4, audience. Can we have an audience with our production? Where safe and possible, students should perform in front of a small live audience. If this is not possible, a remote or virtual audience will be acceptable. This means that students can perform live or virtually in front of a small audience, which must include their teacher, or perform just to their teacher. The teacher must be able to authenticate the work of the students. Therefore, whether it's live or recorded or remote, the teacher must be present. The requirement to record performances still remains central to the assessment procedure. And remember, any work that doesn't have a recording cannot be awarded marks for AO2. So make sure the recording is taken just as seriously as ever. The final part of this presentation looks at some frequently asked questions, which I won't read out to you, but I will leave them on here for you to have a little look at. The first one is for students who have already completed work. Will they need to redo it? The second one is for students that are partway through their devising process. The third one is for one student completing the course, and that's to do with non-assessed candidates. And then the next one is just clarifying regulatory minimum times. So it's worth having a little look at those just to make sure that you're clear. If there are any other questions, I hope this has been helpful. On behalf of the senior team, thank you for your patience. On behalf of Paul Webster and his team, thank you for your patience and your good humor as we awaited approval from Ofqual, which we now have. If there are any further questions, please contact Paul Webster as the subject advisor. You can contact him there on the link or email him at teachingperformingarts@pearson.com. And I honestly say I think I'm looking forward to seeing the work of our candidates this year more than ever. This is going to be a hugely exciting opportunity for students to create original performance work. And when there is so little theatre available and ready to us in the mainstream, hopefully it's going to be this new generation of theatre makers and practitioners that will lead the way and put the arts back on the map. Many thanks for your time. That's 15 minutes. That's more than enough. Take care and good luck with component 1.